Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Smith, and I'm an associate professor in the philosophy department here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I'm talking to you today about the value of philosophy. I wanted to give you a little bit of information and a little bit of encouragement to engage with us here at the philosophy department at UH Manoa. And one way to sort of get in on this question and open it up a little bit is to think about what we mean when we say and when we ask the question of what the value of philosophy is. Well, that term value, it doesn't just have one meaning. In philosophy, we tend to distinguish between two different forms of value, which we might call the intrinsic and the extrinsic. The extrinsic is also sometimes called the instrumental value. And so, with that distinction in mind, we can approach the question of how to understand the value of philosophy by thinking about another question that every person who studies philosophy must face. And that question is, well, oh, you're studying philosophy. What are you going to do with that? Now, the question is usually asked in a skeptical tone, implying that studying philosophy lacks a certain kind of value. And I want to note that the presupposition embedded in this question is that for something studying philosophy or otherwise to be worthwhile, to be worth your time, it must lead to some result that is sort of antecedently valued and then subsequently achieved through the doing of the activity. Now, the problem with that presupposition is that it is committed to a conception of value that is highly instrumental. And the problem with that presupposition or tacit commitment is that some things, and here I would say philosophy is one of them, are worth doing for their own sake. They're worth doing in and of themselves, not just for the results that might accrue to them. Why is that? Well, philosophy helps you exercise your rational nature in pursuit of fundamental truths. It teaches you how to ask questions in a serious and deep way. And it develops certain skills that are really important right now in this phase of life that we're all in this time of history. It teaches something I like to call ambiguity tolerance, the ability to sit with uncertainty and to learn to be comfortable and even enthused by that uncertainty. And it teaches open-mindedness, the capacity to perspective take. It also trains logical precision and clarity of thought. And these are very important intellectual virtues. And I would submit that training these capacities is worth doing for its own sake. Similar to the way in which artistic creativity, even if, it leads to a big audience or a good sale of an artistic piece, the creation of art is worth doing for its own sake because it exercises our human nature. It helps us be better and more actualized versions of ourselves. And we run the risk of doing ourselves a discredit if we evaluate the merit of a given action only on the potential for it to deliver instrumental value to us, things that we might accrue down the road. Some things are worth doing for themselves. Now, this isn't to say that philosophy doesn't have some tremendous instrumental value. It does, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I take those values to be in a few moments. But I wanted to start with the intrinsic value because that can be missing sometimes in the way we frame up our choices and make decisions. And if all of our decisions are in pursuit of instrumental values, then life can come to be a bit of an empty rat race in pursuit of further gains that never fully satisfy. And so finding something that's worth doing for its own sake is really important in human endeavors, so that you can live a good life. Now, one way to sort of think about the value of philosophy, both intrinsically and extrinsically in the context of your study as an undergraduate here at UH Manoa, is to compare it with other domains of study that might be familiar to you. So, for example, philosophy shares a lot of similarities with science. Science and philosophy both have a rigorous focus on evidence and argument in pursuit of the truth. And that is a worthwhile skill and a worthwhile form of knowledge. Unlike science, however, philosophy tends to ask non-empirical questions. What I mean by that is that empirical science is concerned with the structure and behavior of the natural world. But there are certain questions that can't be fully addressed by looking at what the world is like. So, for example, normative questions like what does it mean to be a good person? What is a life well lived? Um, these aren't questions that we can answer just by looking at the world. To be sure, it is very helpful to gather empirical evidence to address those kinds of questions, and we can compare the way different cultures live and try to come to some conception of what a good life might be or who a good person might be. But philosophy tends to approach certain questions in a way that's non-empirical, right? We have to reflect and think about the nature of our own values and what's worth pursuing and why. And that embodies a certain form of inquiry, a certain form of rational self-consciousness that cannot take the values with which we've been raised or the patterns in which we've been living for granted. We have to, and indeed we have the capacity to examine our own standards and ask if they're worthy of upholding or whether they need to be changed. And that's a form of freedom that we have as rational beings that's worth pursuing, worth cultivating so that we can be accountable to each other. And that's a distinctively philosophical project. Philosophy also shares a lot with religion. Religion and philosophy are both concerned with truth and the ultimate nature of reality. Um, what, if anything, happens to us after we die? What is the purpose and meaning of life? These are questions that religions have been wrestling with for a long time. Same with philosophy. Historically speaking, many of the world's great philosophical traditions are also the world's great religious traditions, like Islamic philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. Both of those are also world religions. One important difference between how philosophers tend to proceed versus how religions proceed in interrogating questions about the ultimate nature of reality is that in philosophy, faith tends to be um, not dismissed necessarily, though it is by some, but downplayed in its importance. It's at least insufficient for truth. And the texts that we study are valuable primarily for their arguments rather than for any divine revealed truth. So philosophy, unlike religion, tends to center reason and critical inquiry over faith and revealed truth. Finally, literature. Philosophy and literature have a lot of similarities. They both utilize the imagination to think creatively. Literature tends to be more focused on story and narrative. Philosophy less so, but many of the world's great philosophers use literary architecture to make their points. And in that way, philosophy shares a lot with literature. And so through this kind of comparison, we can come to a more articulate conception of philosophy's intrinsic value by seeing the ways in which it overlaps with other valuable modes of human inquiry. Like the scientists, philosophers are rigorous in their demand for evidence and in their development of careful arguments. Like religion, philosophy is centrally concerned with the ultimate nature of reality, our purpose, and the meanings that we articulate for ourselves in how to live best. And like literature, philosophy is a highly creative endeavor. It will work your imagination and encourage you to think a thought that's never been thought before. And that's a beautiful thing. Now, I want to transition to a brief discussion of some of the concrete instrumental benefits of studying philosophy. At the undergraduate level, in terms of trying to map out a degree trajectory, philosophy pairs extremely well with a host of other disciplines. For example, in the humanities, philosophy is an excellent paired up with English, history, political science. All those disciplines carry within them philosophical questions. In science, in the STEM fields like physics, biology, and computer science, philosophy can orient you and get you asking deeper questions about the nature of matter, the nature of life, and the nature of mind, right? Computer science is really kind of evolving into AI right now, and artificial intelligence demands of us that we have an adequate conception of what the human mind is so we can evaluate whether the artificial intelligence engines we're constructing right now will ever achieve what cognitive scientists like to call general intelligence. we might not be that far off. And philosophy is very important for adjudicating those kinds of questions. And in the social sciences like psychology, sociology, and anthropology, philosophy is very important for thinking more carefully about the nature of the mind, how we individuate persons versus cultures and societies, and what the proper relationships are between groups and individuals. And in short, all of these disciplines in the humanities, STEM, and social sciences, all of these disciplines are animated by, and in fact, are in some respects specialized responses to fundamental philosophical questions, which means if you study philosophy as a major alongside these other disciplines, you're going to go deeper, you're going to have a richer experience, and you're going to come out of your degree as an undergraduate with with a sharp mind and a good education. Beyond the undergraduate, philosophy majors reliably score among the very highest in a number of post-bachelor professional tests that people have to take in order to move on to other professional training after their undergraduate. For example, the GRE exam, the LSAT exam, the GMAT exams, all of these exams, among the very highest of people scoring on these exams are philosophy majors. Philosophy will prepare you for the kind of professional training you will receive in post-bachelor professional training. And, career trajectories in law, politics, journalism, and all manner of scientific research, all of these career trajectories benefit tremendously from a rigorous philosophical education. And so, in this respect, philosophy is both valuable intrinsically because of the ways it trains your rational self-consciousness to be more open and curious and rigorous in the way that you deal with the world. And philosophy is valuable extrinsically because of the way it pairs off with other majors at the undergraduate level and the way it prepares you for professional training after your undergraduate degree. Philosophy is intrinsically dignifying in its pursuit of truth through active questionings, arguments, and evidence, and it delivers tangible results down the line in your degree, in your career, and in pursuit of a good life. And so, on behalf of all the faculty here at the Department of Philosophy at UH Manoa, we sincerely hope that we'll be seeing you in some of our classes, and we wish you all the best.